One.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And we're going to be talking about a guy who is taking the internet by storm right now. Just about everybody is talking about him. I'm talking about Andrew Tate, former boxer, entrepreneur, controversial, man of, yeah, I don't really have an end to that sentence. He's definitely a man with an opinion. So we're going to talk about not so much about his history and his career, which you can look up elsewhere, but mostly the ideas that he espouses and what it says about the culture and the world we live in, the way that people embrace or reject what he's saying. Yeah, leave a like and hit that join button. And of course, super chat your thoughts and opinions. First and foremost, it's not clear to me how much of a character he's actually playing. That's kind of one aspect of this that I need to say right off the bat. I think he would probably say it's not a character. This isn't exactly what I believe, but at times it seems hyperbolic. At times he's kind of he's screaming when he talks and kind of like snickering. It's not 100% clear if he's sort of exaggerating his actual views at times. So I think that's something we've seen in the past. It's kind of an ongoing phenomenon of the time we live in. Some would say our last president was sort of semi in character a lot of the time, and it was not always clear when he was being serious, if ever. But oftentimes it is kind of clear what Andrew Tate does believe because he tells us. So as with many of these sort of kind of materialistic type of people, the people who emphasize material values and these men who brag about all the attractive women they're able to get, there's definitely some positive we can abstract from there. And that's a tough pill for some people to swallow. Other times people have a hard time accepting that there's anything bad about him, right? Because they worship the ground he walks on. And we had a similar thing with Kevin Samuels when I did a couple episodes about him here on the show. Of course, some people, they don't want to hear anything positive about the message that Kevin was sending. Other people, they think everything Kevin Samuels says is true. Now, Andrew Tate makes Kevin Samuels look very benign in many cases, very reasonable and calm. So Andrew Tate is this larger than life, hyperbolic, always on, always cranked to 11, and makes Kevin Samuels seem sort of laid back by comparison. But anyway, here's something positive that Andrew Tate has said. He focuses on hard work, entrepreneurship, making your own luck, so to speak. So he said something like, money amplifies. He says, money amplifies who you are. So when you make money, if you are already a hardworking person with a great work ethic, if you're already a driven person, then making money only drives you more and makes you clean up your act and sort of fine tune your operation and improve yourself even more. That's how some people handle making money. Other people, they were always cutting corners in the first place. They always had a cynical sort of, cynical really says it all. People who they always thought life is about luck and they never really wanted to work very hard. They never wanted to hold themselves to a very high standard. If some of those people come across money, let's say they earn it by accident, or like would they earn it or they stumble into it somehow. Let's say they bought a crypto coin that ends up being worth $100 million, just for example. They didn't do very much to earn the money that they now have. You sort of see their character being magnified by that. Now they're even more cynical. They're even more sneering and untrusting and just generally corner cutting and cynical. Again, that says it all. So I like that. So there's an example of something Andrew Tate has said that I think is true. Money, when you make a lot of money, it tends to amplify who you are, good or bad. So there's an example of something good said by Andrew Tate. And I think if you watch him and you watch him talk about business and hard work, you might abstract many other positive things that he says. All right. Now, some of the negative things he says. First and foremost, anytime you see somebody being super, super arrogant, he's got all the answers. He's not curious at all. No curiosity, no thinking out loud. His answer is never just, oh, I don't know. I need to think more about that, or let me get back to you. Like you tell me what you think. You never get that from him. So if you look at the namesake of this channel, Ayn Rand, obviously she's been accused of, thinking she knows everything. I think the more you look into who she was and the more you study her writing and her work intently, the more you see she demonstrates how she arrives at her conclusions. And when she was taking questions from people, she often, or in some cases, would say, I don't know. And sometimes she would think out loud. Someone would ask her, like, is there an objective standard to human beauty? And this is a really interesting moment. She starts answering, kind of thinking out loud. She kind of realized while answering the question, she said, well, isn't it true that different races of people there's different features that look good to those people? She gave, black, white, and Asian as the three examples. There are different features that make those three different groups look good. So that was just kind of something she came up with on the spot. It's an example of somebody who is actually thoughtful and doesn't want to be believed just for the sake of, being believed, and not looking for power, and not gaining her self-esteem from other people's validation. So when it comes to Andrew Tate, you get this arrogance. He knows everything. Doesn't mean he's always wrong. Maybe he's right a lot of the time, but be suspicious. Do not put him on a pedestal. Do not think this man is going to, lead you to the promised land. I would definitely take what he says with a grain of salt and question everything. He really, really emphasizes status. To him, status, or status as he pronounces it, status is everything. I've heard, and that doesn't mean he's always consistent, by the way. With most people that are out there running their mouth, you get contradictions. So he does talk about relationships and meaning and all of that, but then he says, like, status is everything, right? Status is everything. He says, why do you want a beautiful woman? Because you get to be seen with her, right? It's other people's opinions. Why do you want a great car, an expensive car? You don't care about a car. It's that it's your status. You get to be seen in it. And I mean, God, is that wrong? Boy, are those two examples bad. In my opinion, definitely a lot of you would probably agree. First of all, the company and the touch of a beautiful woman is a valuable thing to you, right? Whether or not anyone else sees you, I think, is secondary at best. Now, of course, some people do want to be seen. Or maybe a lot of people want that kind of secondhanded quote value. But to say that the only reason anybody wants a beautiful woman in his life is status, I think, is revealing. The other example is a car. Now, this is a car is much less of a important thing in your life than a woman, I would say. Although a nice car, an expensive, smooth, fast car, ladies, I gotta be honest, those cars do give you a run for your money. I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek. Cars are cool. Cars are fun to drive. Cars are they're awesome. So again, to act like it's all about other people's opinions, it's secondhanded. And I don't think that's how all people are. I don't think it's how any people need it to be. Maybe some people are that way. And why people are secondhanded, this is the type of perspective you'll get often on this channel and on other objectivist sort of think tanks. It's philosophy. It's the role of philosophy. The ethics of altruism, the ethics that is prevalent through history and today, that says the moral ideal is to sacrifice. The moral ideal is to put others above yourself. And if it's true that other people have primacy, then their opinion really matters. Their opinion of you is everything. So your subconscious, I would offer, is doing these calculations and you don't even realize. So why do I care so much what these other people think? Well, your moral purpose in life, because of the code you've accepted, says that these people are above you. You can see why philosophy matters. Now, Andrew Tate is, like most people, not a career philosopher and doesn't even realize how philosophy has shaped his worldview. He's very materialistic. He has this very zero-sum view of the world, as do many people. He thinks everything's about, the conqueror versus the conquered. Everything's a competition. And that's just the way that he sees it. He talks about, the reason that ancient the Romans, won is because they weren't just sitting around thinking all the time. They were, beating up on and conquering others and taking their women and taking their booty and taking their gold. But in fact, I would offer you is the reason that Rome were successful, and the reason that all successful societies, such as the United States today, are relatively successful, is because of the extent to which they have embraced science, embraced the intellect, embraced reason, embraced individual rights, which includes trade, free trade, elements of capitalism. These are the things that make individuals, empowered and make a culture, a nation, a society, a country thrive and become actually very strong. So, you don't see too many barbaric countries winning against free countries. I mean, you look at, Israel, for example, small country. The people living in it are probably per capita physically smaller than, the Arab nations around them. And somehow this small country full of hyper intellectual people have managed to tame the 100 million people surrounding their borders that would like to wipe them off the map. And the reason for that, I would offer you, is because, again, they've embraced science, they've embraced trade, they've embraced rule of law as opposed to rule of men. It is largely a free society, and that the law comes before any one person's whim. It's not perfect, nor is any country today, but relatively, Israel is an example of how an intellectual country, like a country where the intellect is respected and allowed to be, becomes actually militarily stronger. And before someone says, "Oh, it's the U.S. that sends them money," the U.S. sends literally the same amount of money to Egypt. How's Egypt doing? America arms the Palestinians. Literally, Israel and America both send money to the Palestinians. How are the Palestinians doing? How are all the other countries in the Middle East doing? Is it possible, perhaps, that what I'm saying is correct and there's more to life than how much money somebody gives you? There's more to life than money. Maybe money is the consequence of using your intellect and producing, rather than this finite thing that we're all scrambling to get a little bit of. That certainly, that latter perspective is what I think Andrew Tate holds. To him, everything's zero sum, right? There's a fixed amount of wealth in the world. There's a fixed amount of beautiful women for everybody to fight over. And he definitely sees the world that way. He talks about The Matrix. To him, he really loves that movie. I got to tell you, sometimes I wonder if the people who made the Matrix movie sometimes look at the internet and just kind of wonder what they've done. Like, what have I created? Like, did the captain of the Titanic cry? I've asked. Did Rush Limbaugh look at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and just sort of reflect on the monster he's created? That's kind of what I've wondered. I mean, I'm being a bit of a sidetrack here. I'm being a little bit joking around here, but yeah, what is with the Matrix? And these people, they love the Matrix. So what does the Matrix basically say? Everything you think you know isn't really true, but the actual truth you can find out if you take the red pill. And Andrew Tate loves being, quote, red pilled. And he says, in this Matrix, they quote unquote, they've turned us against each other, right? Men versus women, blacks versus whites, Democrats versus Republicans. They're turning us against each other so that we can fight amongst ourselves and they can remain in power. And first of all, is that what they are doing, Andrew? Are they turning men against women and vice versa? Is that what? Don't you hate what they are doing? Give me a break, first of all. But also, this perspective of like that there's this elite out there, which Andrew Tate, by the way, he desperately wants to be a part of. He wants to be the one who has power over others. He wants to be the one who people are afraid to challenge. He wants to be this puppet master. It's evident by the things that he says and his behavior. But this whole worldview, it drops the context of the fact that every one of us human beings with a functioning brain has an intellect, is able to think independently, is able to look at the world first-handedly, make choices, make decisions, choose values, and follow a certain philosophical course. And this is why philosophy has such enormous consequences. So I don't think Tate even realizes the way he's been manipulated or the way he's been influenced by philosophers through the ages. The fact that he thinks we live in a matrix is itself the consequence of philosophy. The fact that on one hand, he talks about how the socialists are everywhere and they're going to destroy us and they're manipulating us. On the other hand, he has this very Marxist influenced worldview where like everyone's part of a group and the groups are all at each other's throats and we can't possibly see eye to eye. I think he doesn't quite realize the way that philosophy has shaped him and shaped the world around us. Also, the fact that he's kind of like a Gail Wynand. If you read The Fountainhead, he sort of has Gail Wynand will definitely come to mind if you go down an Andrew Tate rabbit hole and consume a lot of his content. But I don't know if he has any of Gail Wynand's redeeming qualities that I'm sort of rhetorically asking with the implication that he probably doesn't, but maybe a little bit. I mean, maybe he does have some redeeming qualities. I obviously don't know him all that well. He talks about religion and tradition, right? So this is something you get. And again, here's an example of how philosophy impacts us and shapes the way we tend to look at things and operate. He's basically getting his worldview from the quote biological or biological determinists or the evolutionary psychologists. Like everything is, sort of embedded in us because, here's how I would sum up a lot of this stuff that we hear from these types of thinkers. Here, like whatever it was that brought us to the level of cavemen, kind of what it took to survive as cavemen is basically still who we are. So the fact that, we need to be very rough and violent in order to win is because that's what cavemen needed to be. So Andrew Tate, he'll talk about how, a woman, she wants a man who's, ready to kill when the time comes. And it's kind of like, I think what Ayn Rand would call like a lifeboat situation, to base so much of your life around emergencies. Everything is about like what to do when there's a fire, what to do when someone breaks into the house, what to do when someone attacks you in the street. Of course, those things matter. And there's definitely a lot we can learn about men and women by the different roles that they tend to play when someone attacks them in the street, or the roles that they can play, the role that he can play, the man, and how a woman sees him as the result of that. I'm not downplaying all that. I think there's somewhat of a kernel of truth in a lot of what people like Andrew Tate say. But that we can infer everything we know about men and women from such emergencies, I think suggests that Andrew Tate and others like him, the people impacting him, they see all of human existence and intercourse as derivative from, how cavemen functions, just like how life is in the wilderness. But what we can actually learn by observation, so I'm not just being philosophical, up in the clouds in my head, I'm actually saying, look around you, see the extent that human beings have flourished, the extent that human beings have been able to live not in violence, the extent to which the money in your pocket is not being taken away from you, and your other values are not being taken by force, the extent to which you're not being attacked physically, is the extent to which we have embraced reason as our tool of survival individually. And that's something that Ayn Rand magnifies, emphasizes, and really brings to light. The light there is not merely metaphorical, or maybe it is metaphorical. We're able to survive and thrive because we use reason. So if life was all about physicality, if life was all just about brute force, then of course the physically strongest humans would have outlived, conquered everybody else. And to the extent people could have formed nations, which I'm not sure they could without using their intellect, the physically, I guess, most numerous country would just swallow the others. But I mean, without the intellect, people just devolve into the state of sub-animals, really, because even animals, they're sort of they have evolved to survive in a certain environment. Animals can sort of just go from association to association, from stimulus to stimulus, and survive. But human beings, we don't even have that. We've got the intellect, we've got our mind, or nothing. Think or die is basically how I would describe the state of human beings. But it's taking us so long to really understand that through history. It's taken so long for philosophers to come about and really point this out, and then for others to understand it, and for the field of philosophy to really embrace this thing that is just so clear once you see it. You can't unsee it. Reason is man's tool of survival. So yeah, just as all the animals and all the life forms have their method of survival, the human method of survival is reason on an individualistic level, and then a civilization, a political environment in which the individual can follow his rational judgment. From there, we get, liberty, free speech, free, property rights. We're able to trade with one another. And, we get what can be, I guess, conceptualized as capitalism. But capitalism, I think, reflects the individuals in the system being left to follow their own rational judgment, because, again, reason is man's tool of survival. With this being the case, how reason is man's tool of survival, and I'm using the word man here out of habit, but of course, man or woman, any functioning adult with a functioning brain, reason is our tool of survival. And so, how can we then look at at relationships? How do we look at just generally, like, what makes a man masculine? Is it necessarily that he can lift? Is it necessarily that he's ready to tear somebody apart and risk his life physically to protect a woman? I think those things mean something. We can definitely learn a little bit from them, or maybe a lot. But if it's true that reason is man's tool of survival, then maybe a human hero, a masculine human, is not necessarily going to be so physically domineering, if that's the word. And you look at Ayn Rand's heroes, they're lean, they're radiant, right? Their physicality reflects their mental health, like their mental attuneness with reality. Their mind is focused on reality and production and pursuing the good life, and their body kind of reflects that, but they're not necessarily the most ripped people on earth. Because, again, if human life was all about just physical brute strength, then the barbarians would be the winners of history. And I don't even know what winning looks like in such an existence, because the barbarians themselves would be stumbling around and failing. So yeah, there's a lot about human relationships in romance, human relationships in general, masculinity and femininity. There's a lot of questions that are difficult to answer, even when you embrace a philosophy like objectivism. I still don't have answers to a lot of these questions. So I'm not here saying Andrew Tate is wrong and I have all the answers. I'm saying I think Andrew Tate is misguided, and I hope I've articulated in what ways I think he's misguided. But what should a proper relationship look like? By should, I mean, like, what is the type of relationship between a man and a woman that makes them both happy and fulfilled and enable them to sort of coexist in a happy and harmonious way in the modern world, in a world where women do have political equality and should, in a world where men are not, living by their brute strength, but rather using their intellect, but where men are trading with one another. So this whole zero-sum view of the world, it might have been true in the wilderness, but we don't live in the wilderness. By trade, by intellectual activity, we've been able to adjust the wilderness to suit our needs. And now we deal with each other by trade and should, and that is the way that human beings thrive. So in a world where men deal with each other by trade, by persuasion, what does masculinity then look like? Is masculinity still excuse my language, a dick swinging contest like Andrew Tate suggests? Or is, I don't know, maybe independence, integrity, a man's commitment to his values, to his convictions, a man who is truly selfish in the truest sense of the term. And we can see that in art, of course, in Ayn Rand's novels, and maybe in some of the romantic writers, we can see it as well. Maybe that's real masculinity. And I think Andrew Tate would probably agree with a lot of the positive things I've stated, saying like a man who's committed to his values is masculine. I think Andrew Tate would agree with that. But also he lives with this premise of, brute strength and zero sum, and everything's a competition. And I don't think everything is a competition, not among rational men. So the final thing I'll just mention is, according to Andrew Tate, it should be okay for men to cheat, basically, or for men to have multiple partners, but not for women. And he says, it's gross. If a woman cheats, that's like disgusting. But if a man cheats in a relationship, it shouldn't even be a deal breaker. It should just kind of be taken as that's a man being a man. I mean, look, as a man, I'll say let's not rule it out. But I'm being, obviously I'm kind of joking. But does that make any sense? So like a man can cheat but a woman can't. I mean, is that going to work? Is a relationship going to function that way? Or is either party going to be happy? But again, there's a lot about relationships, a lot of questions I can't quite answer as the world becomes modernized, as liberty, capitalism brings about all these opportunities. There's a lot I don't know about what makes a marriage work long term. I don't know. We did an episode some month, maybe a couple of years ago now, me and Nikos, about like life extension. What was it like? If technology makes us live indefinitely, basically. Like what would a marriage even look like? What would a marriage look like in that reality, right? Like you can, if you're living for thousands of years, you can get married and be in love, but eventually just, you split up, and then time passes and time passes and time passes. And the day can come where you don't even remember the person you married. That's how much time can pass. You could literally run into the person you used to be married to and not remember having known them 1,000 years prior. Right. So it's very difficult to even to look at a lot of these issues, relationships, et cetera, in a world in which technology and science is bringing about a new situation that we're just simply not used to. So with that being said, let's read some super chats. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Roland. He says, I only super chat for the status. Well, I forgot to mention, any of you who want to achieve status, go ahead and super chat. Marilyn then says, asks, Rush Limbaugh was dead by January 6th, wasn't he? No, he wasn't. He died later that year, maybe even a month or two later. But the day after January 6th, 2021, Rush Limbaugh got on his radio show and he said something along the lines of, and you could look up the exact transcript. He says, some people think that, the political establishment shouldn't be upset. It should be respected. Some people think that you shouldn't break the law, et cetera, et cetera. In some way, he alluded to what had taken place on January 6th, and since many people say that this should not be done, and then his concluding remark said, I'm certainly glad that the founding fathers of America didn't think so. If what I just said was a little bit confusing, he compared the January 6th people to the founding fathers of America in so far as they both would not, be complacent in the face of whatever it was. Marilyn with $2 says, would you call Tate a social metaphysician? So what is a social metaphysics, I guess, would be where you learn. Yeah, I can't go. I've heard objectivists use this phrase. I think I think it came from Ayn Rand, right? I would assume it does. Social metaphysics. Is in one of her essays where you replace other people's opinions and other people's choices for the given, right? So there's the metaphysically given versus the man-made. But when you put the man-made as the primary, like when you treat the man-made as though it's a metaphysically given, then you're turning other people's choices and their thoughts and opinions into your kind of reference point for reality. I hope that it does the concept justice. Now, is Tate that? I mean, it certainly seems like he is. There is, I think, a lot we can learn by observing people. I think Aristotle, from what I understand, he did a lot of that. He looked at the way people functioned and lived, and he derived certain opinions about ethics, let's say, or about a proper political system. And look up my recent conversation with Greg Salmieri about Aristotle to get a clearer explanation of what Aristotle did. But I think there is a lot we can learn by looking at people, right? We can't just completely forget everything we've ever witnessed with people and say, what would the ideal man and the ideal woman be like? And how would they treat each other? I think we can learn a lot by our actual relationships in reality. What do we like? What do we look for? What do we find attractive, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a lot we can learn, but we need to try to control for the role of philosophy, for the impact, the influence of ethical beliefs and epistemological beliefs and stuff like that. Thank you for joining us today. it's good to be here. I guess with that, we have no more super chats and no more questions. So I will go ahead and read the announcements at 7 p.m. UK time today, which is at 30 minutes from now. The Fountainhead Book Club with Lisa Van Dam and Shoshana Milgram will be for members only. It will also be live streamed for YouTube members. So hit that join button now for the opportunity to study The Fountainhead, a magnificent book with, frankly, two of the best people you could hope to study that book with. And they're both women. How about that, Andrew Tate? Can you contemplate a book written by a woman and whose two best teachers of said book are women? Don't tell Andrew Tate. And we did talk about The Fountainhead earlier when I referenced Gail Wynand. So you might want to study Gail Wynand a little bit and see if you do see the parallels with Mr. Tate. All right, we've touched upon a little bit of what it is that makes Andrew Tate relevant. There's a lot about him you can learn if you go down the rabbit hole. And hey, maybe some of you will become fans. You can be, quote, radicalized. I'm not one of these people that says, stay away from him, he's going to radicalize you. But when you have the truth, when you have a good philosophy, you're serene, right? You're happy to let the marketplace of ideas run its course. So get out there, decide who you agree with. Do you agree with me? I would just say, refer back to this episode periodically and just hear the points I'm making and just see if, ask yourself, where else do you hear anybody challenging the Andrew Tates of the world this way? And of course, as articulate and wonderful as I am, I think it should be clear I'm not the originator of this philosophy. Look to the name of the channel to know whose it is. Whose it is, and of course, I'm only trying my best at articulating it. Enough with the filibuster. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow for the Daily Objective. And goodbye.